Yo, what's up, small dogs? It's your boy Adam, aka Big Dog. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking about people. More specifically, can people change? Today I'm being joined by Tiffany Silva
Oh, hey guys, what's going on?
and Alexis Alexander.
Hey everyone, my name is Alexander. I'm in civil engineering.
And we're going to be discussing this question from a moral, ethical, and legal standpoint. So, the first thing in this topic is, can people change their nature? I think that it is possible, but I think it's much easier to do that when you're younger. So, for example, if you have some things that happened during your upbringing, or if you're a real not so nice guy, it's a lot easier to become a better person when you're younger because your brain is much more easier to change, unlike the like neurochemistry level. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Adam. I do agree with you. I agree that the person's upbringing does have a huge influence on their nature, the way their personality is built, and the way that they're treated and the way they treat other people when they're growing up. So that definitely has a large impact. However, if it's a matter of whether they can change or not, if it's a yes or no question, I would say that they can change, but it can be more difficult for certain individuals.
It kind of ties back to the philosopher Immanuel Kant, where he talks about pretty much like he emphasizes like duty and moral law. So he could argue that past actions hold like moral weight regardless of the change. But that just comes like to the question of like if people can change, does this impact our judgments of their past actions? Kind of similar to what you're saying. And I feel like yes and no. To some degree, you can change. But at the end of the day, it really depends on how you carry yourself and how you go on your day about, all the things that you've been through and the result of it.
Yeah, I do see your point, Tiffany. I do think that might bring us to our next question then, as to what extent our past defines us, because of course our actions have a real world consequences if they are negative or positive, and they can build people up for the better, or they can also tear down people's lives. So if if we do bad actions, for example, can we ever truly escape the influence of our past actions or our upbringing and experiences? Um, I'm curious, Adam, what do you think about that?
I think our past only defines us if we let it define us. Of course, that sounds pretty corny, but there is a different version of yourself uh, in the brain of every person you've ever met. So some people will think you're you're an ass, and some people will think you're a pretty cool guy. But it really just depends on how you let these things affect you carrying yourself, right? If you had a terrible, terrible upbringing and you became cold and bitter from it, then the people that everyone will know is a cold and bitter person, and hence that's how you'll define yourself. You have to have the drive to not let those things define you, and the fortitude to be able to, well, if you have to cut ties with people, then cut ties with them. And it's not easy, but detaching yourself from your past is something that you can do to let it not define yourself. And can you ever truly escape from it? Yeah, I think you can. But again, it just takes the drive and the fortitude to be able to remove yourself.
What if you don't know that you're in this situation in the first place? And you just have this skewed image of like reality. So you just have these perceptions of these people, and like it could go back to like ego, how your ego is so big that you don't realize that you're this way. Like what really defines or draws a line between like if you're a good or a bad person per se.
So I do think there is maybe some insight we can take from a well-known philosopher, Immanuel Kant. He wrote the categorical imperative. He states that nothing in the world can possibly be conceived which could be called good without qualification except a good will. And so basically what that's saying is that nothing in this world can be good or bad. It is all a matter of perspective, and some things might be good for one person and it might be bad for another person. So unfortunately there is no clear line to be drawn, but if we take it the way that Immanuel Kant defines it, which is that if something can be universally applied, such as lying, if one person can say that lying, it's okay to lie when convenient, and so if that's applied universally, then everyone can lie and trust would break down. So if we, for example, take Kant's word for it, that universally and the categorical imperative that he defines, then that can be one way to take a look at defining good and bad.
That is really dependent on you, I think. Right? I believe good and bad is objectively subjective. As I guess oxymoronic as that sounds. Right? Because if you're a starving father and you have a starving family and you have to steal or lie to protect your family, then at least from an outside perspective, right, that does not seem like a relatively bad thing. That actually seems like a good thing, right? You're taking from where you can to protect those that you love and keep them alive. But then other people, right, they'll see that as just a purely bad thing, right? You're stealing. And so it really just comes down to from what side you want to look at it as, and how you personally want to interpret it. And that's how I feel like a lot of philosophy becomes, and it's evident by how often we see philosophers argue with each other, is things are objectively subjective, and that goes for this too.
So you make a really good point. And I was thinking, what if you have something like, instead of, providing for your family, what if it's maybe getting revenge? Say, like, I think a good example of a superhero that would be like the Punisher. He does not do things ethically, but he does it for a good reason. What do you guys think about that?
I'm not too familiar with the Punisher. Could you be a little more specific?
So he has someone that I can just give you like a gist of it. Pretty much like his whole family gets killed. So he goes and sorts out these people that killed his family, and he kills them too as a revenge. But does it make him feel better? I don't know. But it feels like that's I think he has this whole like I guess I would say ethic, that he believes people don't change, right? So if somebody goes out to kill his family, who's to say like they wouldn't go out to kill other people's families? So it would be better off just to punish them. That's why hence the name, like he has the Punisher as his name.
Well, that's
So-
I think the extrapolation that he's making is fairly logical, but it does also come down to why his family was killed. Is that ever explained?
It does explain why it was killed, but I don't remember the story on the top of my head. I just know that he he goes on like a revenge rampage, and he feels like this is the right thing to do.
Okay, because if it was a specific targeted reason, then maybe not. But if it's just like just because they could, then obviously yes, they would probably do that again, and then yeah, kill one group of people to save many other people's families. I mean, that would make sense. But then also that comes down to, okay, you're taking the lives of other people, and that's a whole other philosophical argument. But let's start looking at this from the more legal viewpoint. Since we're talking about criminals and stuff, should we give criminals a second chance at life?
Yeah, so actually I think that we should give them an opportunity, but it does depend on the degree of their crime and also the frequency of their crime. If we take a look at, for example, what Aristotle defines as ethics, and there's a quote that he says, "We are what we repeatedly do, and excellence then is not an act, but a habit." And so if we take a look at it through the viewpoint of Aristotle, then we can almost define people's personality and their nature by the way that they uphold themselves over an extended period of time. If it is a single act that is the cause of their criminal record, then maybe we can give them a second chance. But if it is something that is repeatedly happening, they're a repeat offender of very severe acts of crime, then maybe that would warrant more severe punishment. Like Tiffany was bringing up with that fictional example, like the Punisher. However, of course, in the real world, that might be more akin to, say, the death sentence. But be curious, Tiffany, do you have any thoughts about this?
I kind of disagree with you because I feel like people that go through their, criminal act, it could be the first time for them. And who's to say, like, there's actually a high chance that they could do it again just because they had a feel for it. And I know, like, Aristotle, like, he emphasizes, like, habit and repetition, but sometimes people want to feel something and they feel like you might not realize it, that they might feel some sort of joy or thrill just for doing this criminal act. Like, I can't think of someone on top of my head. Like, this might be kind of sensitive, but it's the guy that makes videos of him like harming kitties, and he just enjoys, I don't know, just something in his brain, like he enjoys it, and maybe that's his first time doing it and he could get punished for it. But what you're saying is that he could get a second chance because it's the first time he did it. But who's to say, like, he wouldn't go and do it again,
I think the thing that you guys are both dancing around is it should really be a case-by-case basis, if that makes sense, right? We should look at the degree of crime and the context, and I think with that they should be able to be given a second chance, and I think that is proven with our parole system. Right after a short time being incarcerated, then they can get their second chance while still being under the watch of the government, just to see if they repeat offend or something else like that. And then after their parole sentence is up, then they can re-enter society and have their second chance fully. And so one thing that is very interesting about parole and all those things is that it severely affects, right? Once you have the second chance, you are tainted forever, it seems like. Getting a job and all these things, like, of course, you may have changed and or you never changed in the first place and it was just an accident, but the other people around you, right, as I mentioned before, they have a different version of you in their head. And so that next brings up the question, how should we treat people who have committed criminal actions and are now on their second chance?
Well, from a societal standpoint, a lot of jobs don't want to hire criminals or people that had served before, right? But it really, like you said, it just depends. Like, it all comes down to the person. And obviously, getting to even that interview phase, like, that's the part, that's if people are willing enough to give incarcerated people a second chance. Like, people that went to jail has such a bad image that I feel like it's so hard to come up from. And especially the way the system is in America, like, we're supposed to treat it kind of like a rehab for them so they can go back into the world. But I feel like it's not enough. Like, I don't feel like they get it treated like a human per se. It's just it could be better. What do you think, Alexis?
Yeah, so yeah, what I do agree with you on a lot of points, actually, and there are some examples across the country and around the world, such as in Europe, in Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland, if I recall, they have prison cells that are actually a lot higher quality of life than the ones in the U.S. They're more similar, more akin to, say, dorm rooms, and they have a priority for the prisoners' well-being and their social reintegration. So they have programs in place to help them, and also to help them mentally and physically. And so that kind of brings up the point of how we should treat them, even if they are criminals with their past records. How can we ensure that that offense doesn't repeat in the future? And that is, I think, something that we should be integrating more into our prison system, which is ways to really treat the underlying causes of their violent behavior.
Okay, and I think I agree with that. There's better ways that the prison system can operate, but it looks like we are running out of time. So, just to conclude where we're at and where we stand, I think it's I think a lot of things in terms of people really comes by, like we mentioned earlier, on a case-by-case basis, as if how people can change and if people should be allowed second chances. It really does just come down to a case-by-case basis, and also the people who are deciding on those cases. Obviously, there's a lot of lingering questions that'll be around, like, well, I don't think we really got to finish with the Punisher topic that well, but this topic is really, really important, and I think diving into it will enlighten a lot of people about their surroundings and the people that they surround themselves with. With that is all for today's Small Dogs, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.